Hi, it's Bill Sachs from Emmanuel Episcopal Church in Delaplane, Virginia, with a homily for Sunday, September 13, 2020. This homily will be based upon the 18th chapter of the Gospel according to Matthew. I want to tell a story about two men deep in a forest in Eastern Europe. The two men are named Ulrich and George. Both men are hunting. They are intent upon finding their prey. But they've left their hunting parties behind, plunging deeper into the forest, because the two men actually are hunting each other. There's a deep grudge between them that they have inherited from their families. The grudge concerns a strip of land, an insignificant strip of land deep in the forest. Except that it's not so insignificant. At one point, Ulrich's family claimed the land, and George's family claimed they had been cheated out of it. In protest, George continues to hunt on the land. A word to describe that would be poaching. George feels the land is rightly his. How can he be poaching? Ulrich says, no, our family legally gained control of the land. If you come onto our land and hunt, you are poaching. The dispute has escalated to the point that each man is now hunting for the other, and each man has a rifle. It would seem, in their way of thinking, that the only way to resolve the conflict is for one man to kill the other. It's a fictional story. It's a short story with the title, The Interlopers. It was written by an English author with the pen name of Saki, S-A-K-I. His real name was H.H. Munro. He himself died in a trench in World War I, an English soldier. But this short story speaks to conflict in a way that touches all of us. It is timeless. It is about grudges and disputes and how they disrupt relationships, pinning one individual against another, one family against another. So, George and Ulrich are stalking each other as if they were game. They finally are within sight of one another, quite close in fact, and raise their rifles, when on this dark, windy night, a huge tree is blown over by a gust of wind, and the tree pins both of them. It is hugely symbolic. The tree and the dark night and the insignificant piece of land deep in the forest symbolize just how far you and I can go when hatred, when a grudge, carefully nursed over time, seizes control of our souls. Matthew chapter 18 is an interesting story because it begins with the word we desperately need to hear, and that word is forgiveness. Peter asks Jesus how many times we should forgive, and Peter wonders if 7 times is enough to forgive. Jesus says no, 77 times. But then Jesus tells a curious parable about a man who is in debt to a king. The man goes to the king, and the king graciously forgives this man his debt. But the man who has been forgiven turns around, goes to a fellow servant, and demands money owed to him. The man who was forgiven suddenly forgets what it means to be gracious, what it means to offer forgiveness. When the king hears of this, he is angry. The story does not end well. The man who was forgiven, but who demanded payment from his fellow servant, that man is thrown into prison. And even, Matthew says, tortured. It shouldn't surprise us. The story, The Interlopers by Saki, describes two men pinned to the ground. The only reason they are there is because of their mutual hatred. They would not have been pinned by a tree if they hadn't been in search of each other, intent on killing the opponent. I fear that we live in a world today where this kind of sentiment is all too present, especially in an election season. We are deeply and bitterly divided. I think of an election season as a time for people of different philosophical bents, different approaches to public policy, to debate the merits of policy. Instead, what we are getting is character assassination. Don't tell me what you are against. If democracy is to work, tell me what you are for. Tell me what you stand for. Tell me how you wish to build up this community and this country. We have very dedicated, committed people who are doing that in their own way. But the prevailing sentiment is one of division and suspicion and the loss of trust. And if we find ourselves in the company of family or even friends, and we realize that our political and social thinking is different, oftentimes the meal or the occasion does not end well. All too often I have seen gatherings of people where there's one item of complaint after another about the mayor, about the governor, about everything and everybody. We live in a time that desperately needs reconciliation. For genuine past grievances, we need to forgive. So what does forgiveness mean? In the New Testament, the word for forgiveness in Greek is found more than 80 times. Forgiveness is a very important concept in the Bible. The Greek word aphiame, means to let go, to move from one place to another. In other words, forgiveness means letting go of past hurts. It doesn't mean we approve of what may have happened. It does not mean that genuine grievances can be ignored. But it means that we are living in the present. We must work together. We must come together. We must reconcile. We must forgive, let go, and move on. That is the concept in the New Testament. I pray it's not too late. In the story, The Interlopers, Ulrich and George, pinned by the large tree, gradually begin to talk to one another, gradually begin to make amends. The threats and the insults diminish and are replaced by a slow recognition of each other's humanity. They hope their cries for help will be heard. And finally, after crying for help, they see figures in the distance. But the story does not end well. The figures are wolves. The time for forgiveness had passed. It was too late. Pinned by the tree, they are lost in the forest, sacrificed to nature, to the wolves. I pray it is not too late for us in our personal relationships, for us in our communities, for us in our nation. It is time for us to forgive, to let go, and to move on. May God bless us all. Amen.